Welcome back to our roundtable discussion on U.S.-China and Taiwan relations. I'm your host, Wu Ruiguo. In this segment, we will talk about the diplomatic truce and President Ma Ying-jeou's flexible diplomacy since taking over office. Professor Zagoria, would you then share with us your personal assessment? Has that policy been successful? Has there really been a sustained diplomatic truce between Beijing and Taipei since May 2008?
Well, of course, I don't know all the facts, and there are people on this panel who know the facts better than I do. But it is my impression that there is a tacit understanding between Taiwan and the mainland that they will not try to steal each other's diplomatic representatives. And the two test cases have been Paraguay and El Salvador. And it seems to me that there was some indication that Paraguay was on the verge of switching from Taiwan to the PRC. That didn't happen. There also seems to be a similar situation arising with El Salvador, but there seems to be things going on, visits by Taiwan diplomats and officials. So it does seem to me that even though the PRC has not officially or publicly stated that it was on board for such a policy, that tacitly they are going along with it. And I think this does show a more flexible attitude on the PRC's part, just as I think they're probably going to show a more flexible attitude on the question of international space. I would just like to add to this that I, for one, was impressed with Hu Jintao's 6 points
on December
31st. And although he went through the usual motions about one China and unification, there was also talk about military confidence building measures. And also, I think the most important thing was that there was a lot of talk about how to build trust before unification, and that this might be a long period of time. So I think all this adds up to a recognition on the mainland part that, and Hu Jintao in particular, that they're going to have to be more pragmatic, more flexible, particularly on these issues such as diplomatic flexibility, international space, military to military relations. Now that may be, maybe I'm too optimistic, but that's my sense.
And you think that's a good direction that we should both look forward to?
I believe that is the direction,
yes. How about you, Professor Wang? What is your personal assessment of how successful this flexible diplomacy policy has been under the Ma administration?
Well, I tend to agree with Dr. Zagoria's assessment. I think so far it has been a successful strategy by the Ma's administrations. So far, we haven't seen any breakdown of our formal diplomatic relation with our traditional allies. And we have seen some other successful achievement. For example, President Ma right now can bypass the United States inner territory. I mean, not just Hawaii, but can go to the continent to visit our Latin American allies. And I suspect that Beijing would not strongly oppose or protest that kind of bypass. And our former Vice President Lian Zhan can be allowed to attend the APEC, the summit meeting. That's the highest ranking Taiwan's special representative that can be allowed to attend that. So I think we have seen that achievement. And right now, of course, the the crucial test will be like you asked, the coming May's the WHA meetings, whether Taiwan can be granted observer status. I think if we can be allowed to have that arrangement, I think that's another sign to show that the success, of the diplomatic truce.
Ambassador Lord, you being a very well-respected diplomatic former U.S. ambassador to China, in your experiences in the past, would you think that diplomatic truce can that be sustained between two traditionally, intense rivals like China and Taiwan?
Well, I agree with the consensus that so far is so good, although there is one sour note, and Ms. Hsiao touched on this, and that is in many these international organizations or economic groupings or non-governmental organizations where Taiwan's already an observer or a member, there continues to be petty harassment by the Beijing authorities and constriction of what Taiwan can do and who can represent them and where they can go. So I'd like to see that cleared up. It would engender more confidence across the strait. Whether the overall progress so far can be maintained is very tricky because it is sensitive. It gets close to the issue of sovereignty, which is very sensitive on both sides. It seems to me as long as there's continued momentum on economic and cultural and other issues, and the rhetoric on both sides is restrained, then China's going to be more flexible in the international questions. But if we run into trouble on some of these issues, then they might tighten up because this has always been a sensitive issue for them.
Yes.
I would hope not, because I believe strongly that Beijing can allow Taiwan to participate unofficially where necessary, observing where necessary, under strained nomenclature where necessary, but in ways that is consistent with their principles of one China and other elements. And therefore, I think it's important that they maintain a constructive attitude, because otherwise President Ma will suffer political blowback here in Taiwan as not producing benefits from his initiatives, and that's not in China's interest either.
No, and we all know that diplomatic relations of Taiwan, of course, are very intimately connected with our state of relations across the Taiwan Strait. So I'm going to turn my attention to Deputy Minister. We understand that there's been progress in cross-strait relations since May of 2008. And then there's been somewhat fragilely maintained, shall we say, diplomatic truce between Beijing and Taipei so far. How would you then, in terms of the progress that we've seen in cross-strait relations, explain the changes that are happening in our diplomatic policy, to our allies in Central America or other parts of the world?
Well, for too long, I think the two sides had been engaged in a policy, what has been known as the dollar diplomacy. That policy has benefited neither side. What we are hopeful is that if the current state of relations can be maintained to some extent, then we can concentrate on our attention and the resources on improving our substantial relations with other countries, important allies such as the United States, Japan, Europe, and in international organizations and non-governmental international organizations as well. Early signs have demonstrated that gains have already been made. Of course, we also see some minor problems because some middle or lower level of diplomats coming from PRC, they may not understand the new policy yet. So I think we are also in the middle of maybe we would like to take this to mainland China so that in the future better rules of engagement can be developed internationally. This is not like some people suggest denigration of our sovereignty, because we do that to every member of the international community. We have, of course, approached our American ally to help us with our to gain more international recognition. We have done the same to other worthy members in the international community such as Japan, Singapore, and so on. So I think it's time. We also ask, we also talk to the Chinese side so that we may be able to get a benefit by the same. As to how we, of course, the new policy, it takes time to get this message crossed.
Yes.
There's still some confusion, no doubt about that. Our friends at international society or domestically, there's still people who do not understand the good intention of this. I think more persuasion needs to be
needed.
Yes.
Okay, our discussion will be incomplete if we don't ask Ms. Hsiao to share your vast experiences on the international stage. I understand that you recently just came back from a personal trip to South America. How would you think in your experiences, not only South America, but other international occasions, how do you think the diplomatic truce is maintained between the two sides since May 2008?
Well, I agree with Dr. Chao's characterization that it's rather fragile right now, and there will be many tests on this so-called diplomatic truce. And the WHA will certainly be one major test. The continuing maintenance of diplomatic ties with these allies that we have will also be a test. But I think what would be felt most commonly by our people would be the general international attitude China carries towards Taiwan in the space for our people to participate in international activities and their access. But I have to say that there have been some strategic shifts on both our government's attitude as well as China's attitude, and that is our government in the past, the DPP tried to make this an international issue, the right of our participation. And this current government is making it an issue of bilateral discussion between Taiwan and China. From China's perspective, they went from opposing Taiwan independence, that is, preventing the DPP from moving to independence, to their current posture of promoting unification. And these shifts in strategy do also affect how the two sides position themselves on international questions. And it's certainly something we will continue to watch. But I think from the standpoint of the rights of the people of Taiwan, we certainly demand greater international space. And we are still waiting for a greater gesture of reciprocation of goodwill on part of China.
Yes. Well, we're going to take a short break. And when we come back to the final segment of this very important U.S.-Taiwan roundtable discussion, we'll talk about what will happen in the future. What are the opportunities and the challenges ahead? We'll be back in 2 minutes.